Okay. We'll call the roll. Randy Vines, are you here? You're muted, Randy, but I see you. He waves.
I'm here. Sorry, guys.
Great, that's okay. David Richardson, are you here? Jack Coder, are you here?
I am here on 2 Zooms at the same time.
Well, that doesn't mean you get twice as many votes. Melanie Fathman, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Tiffany Hamilton, are you here? Yes, Tiffany Hamilton is here. Mike Killeen, are you here?
Present.
Great. Anthony Robinson, are you here?
I am here.
Okay, Anthony's here. I think, am I missing anyone?
That's 7.
That's 7.
And then Richard.
And Richard, you're here, so you would be number 8. That is a full house. We do not have an engineer. So we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, has anybody read the 2 sets of minutes listed on the agenda?
I move that we approve the minutes for February 2020 and April 2020.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, second. Motion made by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Vines. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I'll wait a second. Okay, those will be our minutes. Thank you very much. I'm sure Adana is grateful. I am ready for the first agenda item.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a point of order first?
Yes.
It's my understanding that one of our appeals of denials at 9 Benton Place, the architect for that project, is only available till 4:30 today. It's just chair's discretion completely, but it's been asked if that might go first.
We've got a quorum. I have no problems with that. Does any commissioner have a problem with altering our agenda to move that item to first?
No, this is Commissioner Richardson, though. I do want to just say at the outset, I will have one recusal on item B, 1116 Missouri Avenue.
Okay. Are there any other recusals?
Oh.
Okay, then let's go ahead and advance the agenda.
Okay. This is the Lafayette Square meeting, by the way. We have 4 items and 3 are in Lafayette Square. So I hope folks are ready to focus on that neighborhood for the most part. All right. This is an appeal of a denial at 9 Benton Place in the Lafayette Square Local Historic District. It is an application for an addition to a contributing building to the district on Benton Place. On January 30th, 2020, the applicant applied for a permit for an addition. It was denied on March 3rd. And after that, there has been a lengthy conversation with that applicant regarding this project. And the staff is recommending that the director's denial be overturned. And that is our recommendation. I do know that the neighborhood association feels differently, and there are neighbors on the block on Benton Place who support the staff recommendation. So with that said, because this is an appeal of denial, I'd like to enter some items into the record. Sorry about that. Not used to having phone calls in the middle of a meeting. The first item to be entered into the record is ordinance 64689. It is the enabling ordinance for the Preservation Board and the Cultural Resources Office. The next ordinance is ordinance 64925, which is amending 64689. And then the Lafayette Square ordinance, which is 69112. I will note that the Lafayette Square standards are have been amended under that a few times, and most recently in 2019. I have a couple other items to enter into the record. They include a letter of opposition to the proposal by the Lafayette Square Restoration Committee, and an additional email from them where they took issue with the fact that we misquoted some of the ordinance in our write-up for the staff report. The board members have received an updated staff report based on that with the proper language. And I also have 3 communications from folks who live on either Park or Benton Place in support of the proposal before us today. I'd also like to enter into the record the original plans submitted along with the application for the project. And with that, we will proceed into the substance of the matter. I guess I should say something that is a little unusual because we're doing a Zoom meeting is we have distributed to the board a PDF of comments regarding all projects. So there's a cover page for each project in the virtual stack that you got that should have those emails and letters. I'm happy to summarize them if the board would like me to do that. All right, so why don't we start off by looking at the project. The first picture we see here is of 9 Benton Place. It is a second Empire mansard roofed townhouse built in the late 1870s or early 1880s. Next slide, please. Next, you see a site plan for the block that identifies the parcel of land that has the building on it. You can see it's towards the southern end of Benton Place. Benton Place is a highly significant street in the city of St. Louis. We all are keenly aware, I think, especially at the news over the weekend, of the private street phenomenon that we have here in the city of St. Louis. And Benton Place is the second private street ever built. And it is the oldest extant one, considering that Lucas Place is no longer a private street, isn't called Lucas Place anymore, and only has one historic home on it anymore. Next slide, please. So the matter at hand today focuses in on the area of the building with the 2 pictures you see on your screen now. On the left-hand side is a general picture of the south facade of 9 Benton Place. The south facade of 9 Benton Place, you can see in the picture on the left that at the top of it, at the top right-hand corner, is the wrapping of the mansard roof at the front of the house. Then further back at the front of that, on the main block of the house, is a projecting bay of windows that have 3. And then behind that is kind of a boxy portion at the back of the building. Coming off that boxy portion at the back of the building is an open porch. The proposal before us today is to enclose that porch permanently. The applicants are seeking to enlarge their kitchen into that space, and that is the crux of the matter. The picture on the right that you see is a close-up of that porch, and that's what we're discussing today. Next slide, please. So as the Lafayette Square standards will tell you, there are a couple of key components in those standards. One is the concept of the model example. And in the standards, it is stated that a model example is key in additions to buildings. The best place for a model example is on the house itself. The applicants have complied with that aspect of the code. The applicants have submitted a plan using this back window at the back. You can't see this from the street, but we do believe it is original to this part of the building, and that it is a projecting bay of windows that is framed, has a very dramatic cornice, and has flat-headed windows. You will notice, can we go back to the previous slide? You will notice on the previous slide that almost all the other windows are round arched windows or segmentally arched windows. But the back window, if we could go forward again, is a flat-headed window. And it was the staff's suggestion that the applicant, if they didn't want to use a round arched window, might consider that as their model example, which they have done. Next slide, please. Here's a site plan showing the the house from above. The dark gray box is where the addition would be built that encloses that porch. I want to take a moment to talk about facade types, because that's the other key component of, like, organizing component of the standards in Lafayette Square. So the front facade is the primary facade. And because there's a large side yard here, the side facade is considered a semi-public facade, and it is covered by the standards. You get a lot of leeway if you're on the rear facade in the standards, but there are strings on working on the side facade. And I think there are two key components of those strings that will come into play in this conversation today. The first component deals with the material above the foundation. Now, the ordinance does say that it's that brick and stone are the primary building materials, and suggest, or they say, that that should be true for additions. They also say that foundations are stone generally in the neighborhood, and the foundation should be a stone or a kind of cement or concrete that replicates stone. You will notice from the plans we are about to see that the applicant here does neither of those things. So normally that would be a big problem for me as the director. But in this particular case, I don't think it's problematic, because looking at the specific design challenges of the site, what's happening here is there is a frame porch that's being enclosed. The applicant is proposing substitute a composite material that basically replicates a frame type appearance. By enclosing the porch, they are continuing to echo that history of the building, using a material that is not what the standards call for, but what is logical for the design of the building here. The foundation is also not a faux stone foundation or a stone foundation. However, there's the grading of the site means that I do not believe this foundation will be visible from the street. And I think it is important that each project be viewed based on the circumstances of its own. If this were being proposed in a more prominent location on the house, I would oppose it as the director. But in this case, I think it's justified. Could we go to the next slide, please? So here's the elevation drawing of the south wall of the building. So we see on the right-hand side, the side of the mansard roof. Then behind it is the bay window that I mentioned earlier with the three round arch windows. Behind that, we see the design for the addition. That design is based on flat-headed windows, replicating the basic language of the model example window on the back of the building. So they're using a model example. They're also keeping it in a frame type appearance, because that's what they're replacing here with the addition is a frame open porch. Next slide, please. And finally, here's a picture of the rear of the building, an elevation drawing really. You see the historic window on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is the replication of that window type and the very decorative cornice. I will say that window on the back here is a relatively unusual window in Lafayette Square. It's not a typical Lafayette Square window, but it happens to be a historic window on the building we're discussing today. So in my mind as the director, I feel like the frame porch replicates the appearance of the open porch, that the frame addition represents the appearance of the open porch from before, and the windows themselves are based on a historic model example, and you can't see the foundation anyway. And therefore, I feel like the weeks and weeks of negotiation with the staff have been fruitful to get us to a place where we have a proposal that makes sense for this site, and that's why I recommend support for the project. And with that, I'll take questions.
Okay, commissioners, does any commissioner have a question? If so, raise your hand. Anybody see any raised hands? Alderman Coder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand on this version of Zoom on my laptop. And I apologize if I missed this, Dan, but what's the date, the existing porch that is being proposed to be replaced. What's the age of that porch? Do we know when it's from?
We do not know when the porch is from. I do not think it is a seriously old, as in turn of the century porch. But to be honest with you, we don't really have a good sense of the date from the record of the Sanborn maps and things like that.
Nothing further.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah, so my question was, so per your staff report, it looks like you determined that under the ordinance that the addition meets the big requirements of massing and scale, proportions, solid to void ratio, color, and appears to be a secondary portion of the main block of the building. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so it looked like in the exhibit materials that you gave us that the development committee disagreed with that, but according to your reading of the ordinance, again, they meet all those requirements.
Yeah, I think it's proportional. Again, I think you're replicating, we're trying to create, and this is maybe where the staff and the neighborhood association just don't see eye to eye. In our mind, we're trying to keep that spirit of that porch in the new development. I think for it to be a brick or a stone addition would make it really heavy and would not convey that feeling that this has been a porch for a long time, although we don't know the date of the porch. So in my mind, those other items are reasonable in light of the fact that we're trying to create that porch-like feeling, which means having more glazing will again lighten it more than having more areas of cladding material or facade material that isn't glazed, isn't glass. And I think that is appropriate, and that's why I think the fenestration makes sense, and I think the ratio of solid to void makes sense, and the amount of lightness and the amount of glazing makes sense.
Got it. And you had said earlier, I mean, so just to be clear, this is the development committee who sent in a letter, not the actual neighborhood association as a whole, correct?
I will let them characterize themselves.
Okay. And this is in the 7th ward, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
the 7th ward.
Thank you.
Thank
As
you.
it turns out, we had the one person here who would know for sure. Are there any other questions among the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, let's hear from the appellant. Is the appellant present?
Yes, I'm present. I don't know if Kyle Notmeyer is still on the call, the architect. He might have, oh, he is there. Kyle, would you like to speak on that?
I'll just say, Dan, thank you for stating the design so eloquently. I don't think I have anything further to add to that, but I can certainly answer any additional questions.
Okay, commissioners, let's go through the same way. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Alderman Coder?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful just to hear from the appellant, from Mr. Schmidt, sort of how long has he been in the house? What's his plans? I think someone said it was an expansion of a kitchen. Just sort of tell us generally about the improvements you've made to the property and your plans for this expansion if it's approved.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I bought the house 7 years ago in 2013. At that point, the house was in really bad shape and had been butchered pretty terribly over the several decades preceding our purchase. The kitchen had been moved to the basement, where the kitchen was originally on the first floor. The floor had been cut out to make an atrium, so there was no floor in that space whatsoever. We put back in the floor. In the process of putting back in the floor on the first floor, we had to remove the cantilevering joists from underneath that bay window, which is our historic model example there. They had been clear cut across in that 1970s renovation to make the atrium. So the bay was actually starting to fall off of the back of the building. It had sunk about 1.5 feet and was extremely dangerous. We moved the kitchen back up from the basement, how it was originally made in the house. There was also a second floor renovation done in the 70s that combined the first and second bedroom to make about a 900 square foot master suite. We reverted that back a couple years ago with Garcia Construction, who I think is also on this call for a different purpose, and restored that the integrity of the house to that second floor to how it was originally made. Earlier this year, we replaced the asphalt tile roof with slate roof with copper gutters, and we repainted the house to. My wife's a decorative arts and design curator at the St. Louis Art Museum, so she researched the original color palettes for this house and returned the house to what would be customary of the actual time it was built. So yeah, we've been slowly trying to, over the last 7 years, rework every aspect to this house to be more in line with how it was originally designed. The screened-in porch that is there right now, we think is one, it's falling down. That was part of the building inspection when we bought the house, that there was some termite damage, so we had to replace it anyway. And it's really not in keeping with what we think would be kind of an architecturally significant or appropriate addition to the house. That's like a 1970s or 80s style type of screened-in porch. So we're trying to significantly upgrade the value and the historical value of the house with this addition that Kyle Nottmeyer designed.
Any other commissioners have questions for the appellant? Is there anybody raising their hand that I can't see? Okay, is there anything else the appellant would like to add to the record? Mr. Schmidt?
No, just that we've been working hard to try and be diligent with the CRO to figure out the right balance here to get this to be as good an option as possible. And we really appreciate their help.
I had one passing question.
Yes, sir.
Given the history of the house that you've told us about, did you buy it by telephone?
I mentioned that my wife is a decorative arts curator at St. Louis Art Museum, and she felt that it was her moral duty and right to invest foolishly in a house like this because it fits in with her life's work.
Oh, it is certainly beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. We did have to buy it. I forget the terms, but we bought it as is. We had no right to try and fix any of the thousands of problems with it. And we've certainly encountered every one of those problems over the last 7 years.
That is good. Director Krasnov, I can't see who signed up to speak. Could you go through that for us, please?
Yes, the Phil Lamzik has signed up to speak.
Okay. Phil?
Yes, are you ready? Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very well, good. My name is Phil Lamzik, along with Suzanne Sessions. We are the two co-vice presidents of the Development Committee, so we're an umbrella group under the Lafayette Square Restoration Committee. That's the community organization in Lafayette Square. So I'm going to go over, let me see, the points in our non-support letter, and then I'll go over some general points. But first, I would like to thank Mr. Schmidt. I never met you before, Tom, but thanks for your preservation's efforts. So please don't take our objection to be personal at all. So I'm going to hit a couple of points in our non-support letter there. I believe the Preservation Board. So we don't support the plans in its entirety. I'm going down the page here. Use of the rear bay window as an HME lacks sufficient verification of it being built in 1885 with the original structure. And as Dan mentioned, it's the only part of the house that has the rectangular windows, unlike the remaining house, which has the arched windows and openings. Let's see. We think of the screen porch replacement. It's more reflective of a modern edition. It doesn't doesn't have any of the aspects of the architectural elements of the primary residence or the historic period. So it's not sympathetic to the standards that we are used to seeing in Lafayette Square. And I just want to bring out a point that we put in the letter. The Cultural Resource Office has a website, History of Lafayette Square, and I like the phrase, quote in there, typical design features were arch doorways and windows, bay windows, and ornate cornices. The facades were built of limestone and sandstone with brick walls on the sides and in the rear. The largest examples were built in Benton Place or on Park Avenue. So in my letter, or in our letter, we described the 4 major ordinance non-compliance. Once again, the sunroom isn't reflective of a historic model example. Let's see, compatibility wasn't there with the proportional to solid voids. We have a ordinance about demolition of the main building. It states a new appendage shall be limited to a single door width opening in the original exterior wall at a secondary public facade, and that's the application in this case. And per the plans, it looks like the first floor exterior brick wall is being demolished. Let's see. Yeah, so general material makeup, not compliant with the code. And then I'm going to stand corrected on number 5. I indicated that the foundation wall is built of a stud frame construction. I think that was in the original plan. So now it's a concrete foundation, but I believe it still has the non-compliant exterior sheathing. Let's see. Bear with me a couple of minutes here. Okay, then I'm going to go over some general points here. Let's see. I wish the owners, well, I wish they live a long life, lived 100 years old, and they stay in the house as long as they possibly can. But I like the board to please consider that people do move, and just consider the permanency of this addition and how the neighborhood will have to live with it, and especially people who move and visit the square. I like to emphasize that the neighborhood is working on a strategic plan for long term, and they made reference of rigidly maintaining our historical design standards in our ordinances. Let's see. Yeah, so the CRO staff calls out the projection as Oreo. I think in general at the development committee, we thought that was just essentially a bay window. Let's see. It was kind of missing a prominent bottom skirt that we think we usually see in an Oreo window. I want to emphasize there was a lack of transparency and the design solution. Didn't seem to be properly collaborated with the development committee. I think Mr. Killeen could attest to an example of a good collaboration of a storefront renovation on South 18th Street. We were, on the development committee, we were reluctant to accept his proposed design changes. We saw some good research done by architectural historian. She proved to us that the proposed window storefront is period. And so, and it seemed to be in this case, we didn't get the due diligence or research. I for one, kind of indicated the Biltmore had a sunroom period. I think Suzanne Sessions, she mocked at me when I suggested that, but there's an input for you. Let's see. And then keep in mind that our development committees, we're going to be in an awkward situation because we advise current potential homeowners on what they can do with their property. It's all based on the strong application of the code. So please keep that into consideration when you vote. So that's all I have. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Director, is anybody else signed up?
No, no one else has signed up.
Okay, commissioners, that completes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Vines, have you got a motion?
I'd like to pass on the motion. I've got a distraction here, so if you could.
Do I need to call the fire department?
Not that bad. It's just a plumbing issue.
Do I need to call a plumber?
Please do. It's not working out for us, this one.
Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion?
Sure. Okay, my motion is that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial of the addition as it has been revised to substantially comply with the Lafayette Square Historic District standards, and with the stipulation that the details be approved by Cultural Resources Office staff.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Who seconded it?
Jack.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion, commissioners? Okay, hearing no discussion. Mr. Director, would you read the roll, please?
I think Jack raised his hand for a second. I saw that.
All right.
I thought that was the mark of Zorro.
Mr. Vines, do you vote yes or no? Or abstain?
Yes, actually, could I have Commissioner Hamilton repeat her motion, or can someone summarize it for me? Because I was distracted.
That we overturn it. We overturn the denial.
With
It
final
has-
details.
because, do you want me to say it again? Or?
I think I heard you, the gist of it. I vote yes.
Okay.
David Richardson,
Yes.
Jack Coder,
Aye.
Melanie Fathman,
Yes.
Tiffany Hamilton,
Yes.
Mike Killeen,
No.
Anthony Robinson, Tony, you're my last one.
I don't believe he's here anymore.
All right. And it's not a tie, so Chair Callow, I assume you're not voting.
I do abstain.
All right. That makes the final vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention. So the motion passes.
So the motion passes. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you want to hear the other appeal now?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and do agenda item D then, Dan.
Okay, we're going to do a little musical chairs here for a sec.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. Doing it this way will allow commissioners who need to leave to be able to leave. We do need to maintain a quorum.
Okay, so I think we're ready for 6152 Washington Boulevard.
Bethany Moore of the Cultural Resources Office. I swear to tell the truth. This is an appeal of the director's denial for 6152 Washington Boulevard. I would like to read into the record Ordinance 64689 as amended by 64925, the enabling ordinance. Ordinance 57688, which are the Skinker to Bolivar standards, as well as this PowerPoint, the agenda, this presentation, and the information that was submitted by the applicants and emailed to the board, including financial and other relevant documents to support hardship claim, denied insurance claim, inspection letter from Old World Roofing, original quote from John Beal for the GAF slate line, correspondence from the owner with the new John Beal quote for Da Vinci slate, And responses from Nancy Homan of the Skinker to Bolivar Community Council, as well as from the Parkview agents. All right, next slide. If you want.
Proceed.
All right. This is 6152 Washington Boulevard. And the section of the roof that we are talking about is the sloped part up here at the top. That has the original slate. And if you can go to the next one. Here is its location, and it's about in the middle of the street on Washington Boulevard. Next slide. Okay, so as you can see, this is a view from the side. It's not the full roof. It does have a flat roof behind it. It's just this little part in the front that's sloped with the original slate still on it. And as you can see with the porch, that roof has been replaced with shingles. You can go to the next one. So here's just some context. If you're looking down the street, there are not a lot of houses on this street that actually have pitched roofs. The majority of them have flat roofs behind a parapet wall. Which makes this house unusual. It's also one of the few that has slate remaining. If you could go to the next slide. And then here is looking directly across the street from 6152 Washington Boulevard. As you can see, that house and the house next to it have both been replaced with shingles. Ooh, you can go back. All right, we'll stay on, if you can go one more back. One more. There we go, sorry. We'll stay on that one. So according to the standards, on sloped roofs where historic roofing material exists, that material or an approved replica material shall be used to replace it. And in this case, GAF slate line has been proposed to replace the original slate. Per the standards, it does not comply because the historic roofing material is extant and is slate, so it's known. And GAF slate line is not an approved replica for slate. An approved replica would be like a synthetic slate, which would fulfill this requirement as a replica material. So there is a difference between GAF slate line shingles and an approved replica material like a faux slate. And with that, based on these preliminary findings, the Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial to replace the slate roofing material with GAF slate line, as it is not an approved replica material for the Historic District standards.
Commissioners, does anyone have a question for Bethany? If so, raise your hand so I can see you. Okay, I see no hands raised. Is there any hand I don't see? Is everybody else as worried as I am about Mark's driving? Apparently not. Okay, good. Bethany, who is the appellant present?
Yes, the appellant is Cameron Ayers.
Let's hear from the appellant, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is the appellant. Not sure what you're wanting to hear from me other than we're trying to fix our roof and we're trying to do this pretty quick. So we were looking to expedite the process, and I kind of thank Bethany for her time working this project with us, and looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about it.
In a sentence or two, what do you want us to do?
If things could go the way I'd like it, I'd like to use the slate line replica product line to replace the clearly deteriorated slate that is on my roof. I believe it's a pretty good hybrid between what exists on the street and what my roof could be in its natural state if it was slate. But I understand the standards are what they are, so I leave that up to you.
Is there any point in Bethany's presentation with which you disagree?
I agree with her entire presentation.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for the appellant? Thank you very much. Bethany, is there anybody here to speak?
There is not anyone signed up.
Okay.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I had a question for the appellant.
That's fine. That's fine, Jack. Go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry, I guess I'm just curious why the homeowner, have they looked at any other, I guess, synthetic roofing solutions? I mean, I believe it was mentioned in Crow's presentation that there are other options besides just traditional slate. And why isn't the applicant using one that I guess would, a synthetic solution that would meet the standards?
Yes, so the application we put before you takes that into consideration due to the extreme costs of the synthetics. The quote we received for the slate line was less than half of the cost of the synthetic Da Vinci installation of synthetic slate on the roof. To us as homeowners sitting on a street with not a single other homeowner having the burden of swapping a roof out to a very expensive synthetic, when looking out our window, we can see nothing but typical shingles that are even, in our estimation, more cheaply made than the GAF slate line. It seems a little awkward to be required to, in this kind of harsh time financially, have to kind of step up and pay for a roof that is twice as expensive as what it could be in our kind of estimation.
Mr. Ayers, you mentioned a financial burden. Is there evidence you'd like to introduce in that regard?
I believe Bethany has submitted our financial statements. The only thing I would add to that is due to COVID, my wife was furloughed right in the middle of the process of getting our roof fixed. Additionally, we tried to go the route of getting it replaced by our insurance company. And as many of you already know, insurance companies are notoriously fickle with replacing things, especially things as expensive as an original slate roof. Due to this, we had to, unforeseen. We thought that the roof would be covered by our insurance company. That was flatly denied by them. So we were unexpectedly having to pull out the entire cost of this roof from our banking account at a time that's particularly burdensome financially.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any further testimony? Bethany, anything to add?
Mr. Ayers, did you want to explain the cost of the two different materials?
Yes, so John Beal has a low cost guarantee on their estimate, and they were the lowest cost estimate we could find. The GAF slate line is a far superior product than just a typical cut and dry run of the mill shingle. It in fact looks very similar to slate, and it is what a lot of our neighbors, even across the street, not on our street, but on the kind of wealthier side of the neighborhood are using. It is a shingle that looks very similar to slate, and it's already heavily incorporated into that side of the neighborhood. They may have replaced their slate roofs with this GAF line prior to the institution of the regulation. But when we got a quote for that, it came in at $3,800 to replace just the portion that's damaged, the entire amount of slate on the roof. The approved line of Da Vinci synthetic product was going to come in at $8,300 to replace just what you're seeing in the picture here. So that's what we're considering here, a pretty sizable difference in cost.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, that concludes testimony in this matter. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
I have a question first, Mr. Chairman. Did we hear from the alderman or the neighborhood on this? I don't know if I missed something there.
I have not heard from the alderman. I did hear from the neighborhood, and it's the Skinker to Bolivar Community Council had said that they were in favor of denial as it did not meet the standards.
Okay.
And then we also heard from Parkview, and they said that they don't have an interest.
Okay. Yes, sir, I do have a motion. So I move that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial on the grounds of financial hardship.
Is there a second?
Yes, I second it.
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Melanie?
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Well, just to explain my motion, I mean, it's, these are rough times we're living in. And if his wife just lost her job, and I've seen this product, and I think it will look handsome from the street. I know it's not exactly what the neighborhood association wants, but I think this is an example of a good project where a hardship for financial reasons apply.
Is there any further discussion? Bethany, would you call a roll, please?
Certainly. Board Member Vines?
Yes.
Board Member Richardson?
Yes.
Board Member Coder?
Aye.
Board Member Fathman?
Yes.
Board Member Hamilton?
Yes.
Board Member Clean?
Yes.
And Board Member Robertson? Tony? I saw him. Oh, he might be gone again. Okay, and Callow?
Register me as an abstain, please.
Okay. So that is 6 yeses, 1 abstention, and the motion passes.
That's great. Okay, let's move back to agenda item A.
We're gonna move again. And bear with us, I have to go all the way back to the beginning.
I'm Andrea Gagan. I'm with the Cultural Resources Office, and this is 1910 Rutger. This is the building in 1910 Rutger. And this is the location. It's close to Mississippi and Rutger Street. And this is a plan view of the proposed retaining wall at 1910 Rutger. The applicant proposes to construct a retaining wall at the front facade in Lafayette Square Historic District. The new retaining walls are reviewed per the district standards. The proposed retaining wall does not meet the Historic District standards due to the proposed change in the slope of the yard and does not have an appropriate model example. The HME that was submitted is not a retaining wall, but curbing that would have originally had a wrought iron fence on top of it. And that's the reason it's being brought before the Preservation Board. This is the elevation of the proposed retaining wall. And blurry here, but it is significantly higher than the curbing that was used as HME. And it also will change the slope of the yard significantly. While the house is newer, the slope was retained when they constructed the house. And this is just a section of the proposed retaining wall. It's supposed to be poured concrete with 4-foot panels of cultured stone and a cap. This is the submitted historic model example at 18th and LaSalle. As you can see, it's a very low wall, which is not really a retaining wall. This is the front yard at 1910 Rutger as it exists right now. As you can see, the 4 feet would bring it up to basically, it will level off the yard at that top terrace. Just another close-up of the current slope. And this is a sample of the type of cultured stone that they are proposing to use on the wall, except that it would be in 4-foot wide panels. There's some context on either side of 1910 Rutger. The proposed retaining wall will alter the historic slope of the yard, is not based on an appropriate model example as submitted, what was submitted is not a retaining wall. The material of the wall may meet the historic district standards, but the height and design of the wall do not. Historically, you would not have found a slab retaining wall of that height or design. Based on the preliminary findings, Cultural Resources Office recommends the Preservation Board deny the preliminary approval of the design as currently presented, as it does not comply with the Lafayette Square Historic District standards.
Thank you. Commissioners, does any commissioner have a question? If so, wave to attract my attention. Commissioner Richardson. You're muted. Still muted. Still muted.
Sorry, too many screens there and a mouse that wasn't working. So you had the applicant as John Mueller, Diversified Real Estate Group.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Because so it's it looks like someone bought the property back in January of 19. Is that so? It's the homeowners who are replying.
Yeah, let me just a second. Let me get my.
Okay.
Yes, the owners are Tara and Scott Evans. The applicant is Mark Manjapora from Garcia Construction.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Raise your hand so I can see you. Alderman Coder.
Thank you, Chairman. Andrew, I know we've got a picture that we're looking at right now on the left showing an old stone retaining wall on the, I guess, left side of the property. I don't know what direction that is. And it looks like there's a retaining wall on the right side of the property. Am I looking at this correctly? Do
Yes.
both properties have retaining walls?
Yes, they do. One is much higher than the other, but neither one of them are the design that they're proposing.
So could I follow up with a question there? So if they came back with a different design, you might have approved it?
If it was lower so that it wasn't changing the slope of the yard, but since, under the standards, if they're changing the slope of the yard, it doesn't meet the standards. You know, they could have a different historic model example, but it would still be altering the slope of the yard.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that for me, Chairman?
It is, Alderman.
Thank you. So I looking now, I've got
I
three
was
devices
pointing at you. I
going here.
don't know why you couldn't see me.
And I guess I know their design is nothing like the, I guess, big stone tall retaining wall on the property to the left, but I mean, if they did something similar to the retaining wall immediately to the right, would that meet the code, or would it not, because they're gonna have to change the slope of the yard?
Yeah, it would change the slope of the yard. And that one I think is only about 18 inches high. So there's, I think the one they're proposing was closer to 4 foot. So there's a big gap in the height of that one. Because the one to the right is much lower than the one on the left.
Thank you. My next question is, did the LSRC or the alderwoman for the 6th weigh in on this?
I don't believe so, but I believe someone from the LSRC is going to testify.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
No, Mike was raising his hand.
I'm sorry, who was raising his hand?
Mike Colleen.
Yes, quick question. I know this is a new build, this house. Do we have any evidence of what the height of the historic retaining wall was on that site?
From what I could tell, before there was not a retaining wall at that location. There was a fence with, it looked like columns that had been built at the very front of it, but the slope appears to be similar to what is there now.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, could anyone else by violent gesture indicate they want to speak? Okay, I really don't see anybody this time. Now the applicant, please.
Hello, this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Not quite. A little louder.
I'll try to speak up.
Thank you.
So this is Mark. I'm with Garcia Construction, and Garcia Construction did build this house back in 2018, and it was purchased by Tara and Scott Evans. So I'll just address each issue and our concerns that we were kind of discussing as we proposed this. First, as Andrea said, the existing soil was being retained by kind of an extensive amount of overgrowth, but there wasn't really a historic context. And so when the owners bought the property, it essentially is just kind of has a drastic slope in a grassed yard, and that's caused maintenance issues for them over, since they own the property. Soil erosion, mulch, and dirt kind of eroding onto the sidewalk. And so they're also concerned that it was a safety issue as well. And that is the impetus of why we're proposing a retaining wall. And furthermore, we believe it would just bring it kind of more into the historic context of the neighborhood, essentially, because it's surrounded by 2 properties that have retaining walls. Plus, more or less every house on the street has some sort of barrier, except for their current properties and the existing conditions when they purchased the house. Second, the historic model example was chosen because we were trying to find an example of a monolithic stone retaining wall that existed in other parts of the neighborhood other than the neighboring property at 1912 Rutger Street to the east. We decided to match the height of the property to the west. And that actually is closer to 3 feet in height. And so it's not that high. We wouldn't essentially be going any higher than the lowest point on that retaining wall to the west. Furthermore, we would probably take it down to 30 inches as well. So it would be 30 inches off the sidewalk to create a safe distance from the top of the retaining wall and the grade down to the sidewalk. And as far as the material goes, we're essentially worried about creating a rubble stone or an adhered stone retaining wall that would look appropriate, especially adjacent to the house to the west, where we would essentially be aligning with that wall. And there are other historic examples in the neighborhood where you have retaining walls of different types butting up against each other. And so we decided to propose a material that had a historic element to it, a monolithic stone that would be kind of reminiscent to the neighbor to the east, but also serve the primary facade as well and match the stone of the new construction house. And so it have more of a cohesive look with the primary residence rather than trying to kind of blend a new retaining wall with a historic retaining wall to the neighboring property to the west.
Okay. Is there anything else?
That's it, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, would any commissioners who have questions indicate so by waving violently at the screen? Alderman Coder.
Was that violent enough, Chairman? Yeah, Mr. Garcia, sorry, I may have missed this. Did you guys build this house? I know it's a new build, or did John Muller build it and now you're helping with the retaining wall?
No, Garcia Construction did build it, and it was a development by Garcia Development. So it was all under the same company.
Got it. And is there a reason you didn't put in some sort of retaining wall initially instead of doing it now?
It wasn't part of the original plans, and I wasn't involved in that project previously, but the project was built per the original plans, and it did not include any kind of retaining wall. And so this project is being brought by the current owners of the project to address the kind of property maintenance and safety concerns.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Is there anyone else? Commissioner Colleen?
Yeah, just to clarify, what's the height of the wall you want to build?
Ultimately, I'd stop it at 30 inches above the sidewalk.
30 inches, so you wouldn't have to put a guardrail up there,
Right.
right? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I do not see any other hands waving. Ms. Gagan, is there anybody here to speak?
Oh, there isn't? Okay. I thought we said this. I guess not.
Okay. Commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion? Do you have a motion?
Before I have a motion, can I have Andrea, how do the plans that they submitted, does that show a 30-inch wall? Is that what they were proposing?
No, it showed, I think, a 39-inch wall. Or no, a 30, let's see. Yeah, actually, 40-inch wall.
Mr. Garcia?
Yeah, that was an early drawing when we were matching the height. And so we did acknowledge later that we wanted to reduce it to avoid putting a guardrail up there. So the final dimension would be 30 inches high.
So Andrea, would 30 inches be more appropriate or?
No, not really. Not in that type of retaining wall.
Okay. Yeah, I have a motion that the Preservation Board deny the preliminary approval to the proposed retaining wall as the slope of the yard is being altered and the design is not based on an appropriate historic model example.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I guess I would just say that perhaps they should continue to work with staff, and this is a preliminary review, so they are not prejudiced by or not limited or prohibited from coming back, but it sounds like maybe they could come up with a revised plan that might perhaps be more acceptable to staff.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah, I would just add, Mike Killeen here would just add, we have the two leaders of the design community over there at Lafayette Square, and they don't appear to have an opinion on this matter. So I would encourage the applicant to work with them to make sure they've got a workable solution and then go to staff. or work together. I don't know. It was odd that they were on the call, but we didn't hear from them. That's all.
Any further discussion, commissioners? Okay, thank you. Ms. Gagan, could you call a roll?
Commissioner Vines,
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Alderman Coder,
Aye.
Commissioner Fathman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Colleen,
No.
Commissioner Robertson,
Yes.
and I'm guessing Callow is abstaining.
Good guess, Callow abstains.
Okay, so it denied 6-1 with one abstention.
B, Commissioner Richardson, you're recusing yourself?
Yes, I'm going to turn off my video.
Okay. Oh, that's so much better.
Okay.
Ready? How come, oh, I don't see myself?
You can see yourself if you look.
Oh,
here.
okay. I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. This is part 2 of the proposal for the Shoto development that is at Jefferson and Shoto and Hickory and McKay in the Lafayette Square Historic District. Can I do my own advancements? Thank you. The site is a little overgrown at the moment, but this is the general vicinity of the project, which will be about at the intersection of McKay and Hickory. I can't advance it. Oh, go ahead. And this is the site in the olive green. The board has seen previously a townhouse proposal that will be along Hickory to the south. And there are other elements that the board has not yet seen that will fill up the rest of the surrounding parcels. But you will note that there is a slight proximity, not really proximity, but an opposite streetscape to this development along McKay Place. Next. Uh-oh. Well, this is the project master plan, but hopefully the architects will have another copy of it. Let's proceed. They're all gone. Okay, well, some of my photos seems to have disappeared somehow.
Is this the thing that Donna sent out an attachment, a separate attachment earlier today for with some of these pictures that are missing?
Okay, well,
that is the second agenda that you received, I believe.
well, in any case, why don't we go to the elevation that we do have? Keep going. Right there. This is the proposal for a 5-story apartment building to be constructed along a new extension to LaSalle Avenue. And it will be primarily brick, 3 stories of brick on a faux stone base with the upper story sheathed in a cementitious paneling. This is being reviewed under the mixed use for large sites without historic context, part of the new construction standards, the Lafayette Square Ordinance. And that doesn't help me if they don't help me. So
If they got the agenda, they could.
okay, so if you can look at your agenda, that might be more explanatory. The designers, HOK, have worked with us. Their initial submission, we were concerned, was not sufficiently compatible to the historic district fabric. Now, it doesn't need to be a replica at all, but it does need to consider things like exterior materials and scale and that kind of thing. So it is what we are referring in the staff to, like tier 3 of the new construction standards. Tier 1 being the ordinary infill where a model example needs to be closely followed. Tier 2, where there is a model example identified, but there is more flexibility in some of its interpretation. And Tier 3, which allows more latitude because of its lack of historic context. Next, see if we've got anything else. All right, this is another shot of the site looking from Hickory. It's very difficult to photograph and make any sense of it, but continue. And again, looking generally in that vicinity, you see McKay Place at the right. And again, we're looking straight down McKay Place, straight north, and the building will be in the left half of the screen. Go ahead. And this is a shot from Shoto, again, looking towards the general area of the building. Next. And another shot from Missouri, looking again towards the general vicinity. And you see the buildings on McKay Place in the background. The staff has, again, as I said, worked with the architect and the developer to refine the design. We feel that it now complies with the standards, and so we were recommending preliminary approval, subject to final design details being reviewed by the Cultural Resources Office staff. Questions?
Commissioners, are there questions? Wave your hands if there are. Okay, I see no waved hand. Oh, Alderman Coder.
Thanks, Chairman. And I'm sorry, I'm using a small version on my agenda here. Where this has structured parking, right, as proposed? If so, where? What's that? Two levels?
2 levels, right.
And where do you enter? My home printer, I guess, is not good enough quality. Where is the parking enter and exit on this site plan, I guess, that I'm looking at?
There will be 2 pairs of garage doors to either end of the new LaSalle elevation along the new LaSalle extension. So in that particular instance, the building does not comply with the standards because all access must be from an alley. That does not appear to be possible given the makeup of the site, and I'm going to leave it to the architects to go into more detail on that. But the staff did not feel that that was a particular issue that would prohibit us recommending approval. The design has been of the entries themselves has been augmented at our request to make them fit in a bit better with the articulation of the front elevation.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing from the applicant.
Further questions from commissioners? Thank you, Jan. Who's the applicant?
This is Bob Powers with HOK Architects.
Okay, go Bob.
Okay, and if I can share my screen, I think I can answer Jack's questions and kind of walk through some of the missing images. I cannot square my, it's not allowing me to share my screen.
I'm not getting a request either. I've stopped our share.
Okay, let me try that again. Share screen. Terrific. Okay. You should all be seeing the master plan right now. So I want to start off with, well, first I'll kind of go on Jan's description. This is the site right here at LaSalle, anchored by Missouri to the west and McKay to the east. You can see it's part of an overall master plan that includes several future developmental pieces. There's a series of townhouses that will front on Hickory to the south. There's another apartment building proposed for Shoto and Hamilton Place. Hamilton Place is a new road kind of an extension of McKay, but they do not connect. There's a difference in grade. As Janet said, LaSalle will extend 1 block east and then turn north to the new Hamilton Place. Proposed hotel directly to the north with a green space or a small park directly across LaSalle. And this is where the water retention is going to occur underneath this green space. And then some office and parking at the intersection of Jefferson and Choteau. Any questions on the master plan? If none, I'm going to move over to our project. And we've worked with Jan and Dan at the Cultural Resources Office and had several conversations. And what we've heard was there was a desire, you know, that it was okay to do a contemporary building in this development district. However, it really needed to match the patterns of the fenestration of the historical buildings in the square. And to that extent, you know, when the primary kind of patterns are in the square is this idea of this tripartite composition of base, body, and top. When we presented this last time, we maybe had the colors a bit turned around, but here you see sort of the 3 main components. The base of the building, as Jan had said, we are proposing a cast stone. There's a series of reveals and patterns to it to give it a human scale at the sidewalk, at the pedestrian level, pedestrian experience. The body of the building is a kind of dark brownish, reddish brick, still determining which the exact brick is. And that's capped off by a kind of strong horizontal line, which is, you see, characteristic in Lafayette Square in the cornices that typically happen at the top of the facade, at the base of the mansard roofs. And then we go to kind of a darker gray top that, while not mimicking a mansard roof, it's kind of that top of the building. So base, body, top, were some of our key elements there. The 2 garage openings, there's the lower level, and there's a lot of grade on the site, a lot of topography. The low point is at the northwest corner at Missouri and LaSalle, and we're a good floor, a single level below when we get to the east end of LaSalle. So we have 116 car parking garage, basically buried on the site. It's only exposed at this northwest corner, and you can see the 2 garage doors opening onto that. There's another 20 cars that we park in the upper level, in the first level. So it's a portion of that first level, and that's accessed on the east end of LaSalle, and you can see that where my cursor is here. So most of the parking is really buried. And I think while we're not coming in off the alley, one thing we are doing is we're limiting the traffic from this project to go no further south than LaSalle. So you don't have any traffic from this project, at least, going up Missouri. You know, McKay is not an option, to Hickory or any of the streets further to the south. Kind of moving along, let's see. And here you can see, you should be looking at the lower level and the garage access. The space you see, the kind of the gray poche around the plan shows the extent of how much that floor is buried into the ground, into the topography. The next slide we're looking at is the first floor. The main entry is mid-block. And again, because of the topography, we're about 4 to 5 feet above the sidewalk at this point. So there's a series of steps and a ramp that will get you down to the sidewalk level. The steps to the west, the ramp to the east. The remainder of the plan, we have the garage entry to the east or to the right on the plan, 20 parking spots. And then a large amenity space kind of central around the lobby and elevator core here. The remainder of the first floor is residential, and then there's a south facing amenity deck off the alley. Typical floor level has about 28 units per floor. There's a kind of a mixture of recessed balconies, mostly in the corners and in the center of the building. on the street facades, a few what we call a modified Juliet balconies. These are slightly projecting, and you can actually step out onto them, which makes them differ from a traditional Juliet balcony. On the courtyard side, the majority of the balconies are projected into the space. What we're looking at here is a side section with Shoto Avenue to the left and going up to Hickory Street. So you're seeing some of the proposed development that I had mentioned in the master plan on the left. At the center, you can see our apartment building, and then the townhouses, and then to the right onto Hickory Street. And I think the message behind this section is that the massing is stepping down from the main commercial street, Shoto, as we get into the district and we head further south. So there's kind of a gentle stepping down of the massing as we get to the more residential neighborhoods. A couple of views of the amenity deck. There will be a pool back there, you know, some passive, some more active spaces that you'll see. And then getting to the renderings, here you see the view from Hamilton, the new Hamilton Place, looking to the south, and you see that main LaSalle facade. And then straight on here, you can see again, the three components, base, body, and top, recessed balconies, Juliet balconies. The center of the facade, we're proposing some accent color, and there'll be a canopy over the main entry. You can see that probably better in the next slide. Here you see the steps, the ramps, and this idea of this sort of ribbon that starts out at the ground plane, wraps, becomes a canopy, and then runs vertically up the building, becomes a signature element that gives it identity from Shoto, and also an opportunity for signage and street numbering, as you can see here. A couple other things you'll see in this view is one is you see the more extensive glass that's right on either side of the front entry. This is providing a little bit more of the active spaces right on the street to add a little bit more visual interest to the pedestrian experience. So as you know, pedestrians are going up and down the street, they're not looking just into the residential units, but they're seeing some of the more social activities at the center of the building as well. As I mentioned, we had worked with Jan and Dan at Cultural Resources, and one of the requests, in addition to kind of respecting the fenestration patterns of the district, is to have a little bit more articulation around the windows. And to that extent, from the previous presentation, we've added cast stone sills at the base of all the windows, and a soldier course at the head of each window. So you see a bit more articulation around the windows themselves. And that's picking up in this image. View down McKay, so McKay stops here. There's a bit of a steps or transition down to the lower level and Hamilton. You can see we're wrapping the brick around partially to the alley side, and then we transition to the paneling as we get more into the alley proper. Heavy cornice line, you can see the recessed balconies, the Juliet balconies on this facade. Moving to Missouri, and again, looking to the north, very similar, almost a mirror of the McKay facade, with the exception, we had a series of projecting balconies here. We got a comment back that they looked like a fire escape, something you might see in New York City. And so we've taken those balconies off and just let the facade come down. For reference, you can see the historic stone ruins on the left here. Cast stone, so we're looking at a product. It would have some texture to it. It would be not quite as light as you're seeing in all these renderings. We haven't got the colors adjusted quite properly, but it will be a gray, a light gray to look like Indiana limestone. There's a series, there's two patterns. There's two panel sizes. One is a 16 by 24, and in a 1/3 staggered pattern. So it's a kind of a running bond, but not quite 1/2, but 1/3 over 2/3. And then there would be some 4 by 24 stones slightly recessed to give it a little bit of rustication at the base. And it starts out fairly dense at the bottom, and then it gets a little bit lighter in the rustication as you get to the top, capped off by a cast stone piece here at the very top. We've recessed the stone just slightly to get a little bit of shadow line and a bit of change in color below the windows that are located above, where it's appropriate, where it works out. So again, you know, kind of adjusting the scale for the pedestrian experience to add some articulation, some texture, some pattern there. The garage entries, we had gone from a coiling overhead door and an overhang that was very much like the balcony projection, the projected balconies, and there was a feel that it was too industrial, a little bit too much like a loading dock. And so we've modified that, and we've introduced kind of 3 components to that design. One is we've gone with a more residential look to the garage doors themselves, and each one's paired. So instead of having one large, you know, 22-foot long garage door, we have 2 smaller scaled garage doors. And we got some options for, you know, whether we do it's a metal garage door, it's a series of planks, either a faux wood or just simply a dark metal. And there's doesn't render too well, but the opportunity to put some glass panel inserts to kind of switch out the wood or metal planks with a glass panel. So very clean, modern look for a garage door. We looked at all glass garage doors, but we felt like it looked too much like an auto body shop. And so while kind of modern and maybe appropriate for a modern single family residence, we didn't feel that that was appropriate here. We also added to the articulation here, and it's maybe a little hard to see, but we've recessed the cast stone on either side and created a big inset that picks up the 2 garage doors and the 2 garage doors, and then the people door as well. And then the third component is we eliminated that industrial canopy, and we just went with a GFRC kind of projected overhang. This would have integrated downlights in it, very simple downlights to wash the garage doors. And we felt that lighting, along with the residential doors, along with the more simplified cornice, with a better proper material, all kind of led to, you know, kind of getting away from that industrial loading dock look to something that's more appropriate and pedestrian friendly, actually. Go to the next. And you can see that overhang and some kind of, you know, kind of similar, we didn't have the brackets, but some similar detailing within the neighborhood itself. The other thing we did in our resubmission was we looked at making a significantly darker brick. We actually had the reverse. We had a dark base and a lighter body to the building previously. We've gone with the cast stone at the base, and we're looking at bricks that are in a kind of a brownish, reddish range. We haven't selected a final brick yet. We won't make that selection until we have both physical samples on hand, as well as mock-ups in the field on the site. You know, this is a very tricky thing. We're going to be looking at masonry color. These examples here are all showing a very sort of generic kind of light colored grout. We'll probably use a darker grout to match the brick. And we think that'd be more appropriate for the neighborhood in the district as well.
Mr. Powers?
Yes, sir.
So this is the preliminary review, and the recommendation is to approve this with conditions. I wonder if you would pause and see if commissioners have any questions.
Most certainly. Open to questions.
Commissioner Killeen?
Yes, sir. Mr. Powers, did you all, I'm just looking at your design. It's very handsome, and see a lot of work went into this. And I know you didn't have to follow the standards as others would up the hill there if they were building something. but did you take a look at like the solid to void ratio, the size of windows? Because it looks like, I don't know, just from these images, like you've got smaller punched openings than what we would have seen up in the district.
We actually did. We went very early on in the project. We picked a couple of the residents on the neighborhood. I think we picked one on Park, and we did an analysis and we did that, and we did some of the larger commercial buildings as well. But the residential, they were about 18% void, with the remainder being solid. And we've been tracking that. We've made a few tweaks lately. I'm not sure where we are exactly now, but we're very close. We're actually maybe a little bit higher, but very close to that 18 to 20% solid to void ratio that we found to be on the precedents that we studied in the neighborhood, which are the typical Victorian houses. So we think we're close. We might be a little bit lower, but we think we're fairly close to that.
And follow-up question. So when I look at those windows that are paired, the doubles, do you know offhand like what your sill height, what your head height is? I'm just curious where you are in the room.
Sure. Our sill height is 36, and we are our head height is right at about 8 feet. So
that could be the difference, because I think historically you'd be closer to 2 feet maybe for a sill height. So
lower.
I don't know. That's just, it would give us more glass,
Sure.
which I think the facade could use. Just you know, architects, it's dangerous to let them look at your design. Everybody's got different ideas.
That's fair. We a couple of things. We were setting the sill height. These are casement windows, and in order to meet the natural ventilation requirements for the building, you know, as you can understand, we need a certain amount of open area, and so this allows us to open the window without having a limiter that we're restricted to what's typically like a 4-inch opening, so we can meet our ventilation requirements and have a guardrail height at the sill. So that was one of the kind of drivers to that. Our first level is a little bit taller, and we have a little bit taller glass on the first level. We have a taller floor height there. So these are all things, good comments and things we have been studying and exploring in section and ventilation requirements in a number, and how the building is structured and all various aspects of that have been thoroughly looked at.
Thank you.
Any further questions, commissioners?
Could I ask why yellow was chosen as the accent color?
Oh, if you can hold that for a minute, you certainly can ask. I do have a slide coming up in a couple of slides, and but a couple of things that actually raises a good point. As we move forward, we don't have the color, you know, nailed 100%. It's kind of a placeholder that we want to have accent at the middle, and with both the color of that and the final selection of the brick, because we're not there yet without doing like real mock-ups, we will engage the CRO and you know, we told Dan and Jan, you know, they might have to go on a muddy site to look at brick mock-ups, but we really want their input as we get into the kind of that level of development or decision making really on those items. So we've looked at several colors. And we did a lot of color analysis as we kind of went to this kind of brownish reddish brick at what were complementary colors to it. And this kind of golden color, this golden yellow is one of the colors that the color experts at least deem is complementary to the browns. There's others, which you'll see in a moment. And,
Thank you.
well, it was actually the next slide. So, so there's some at the bottom. You'll see just some different options. And we really
hold on 1 second.
Yes,
Commissioner, further questions? Bob, I think we understand this proposal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So then just some color studies down here at the bottom that maybe engage both the recess and the red.
Is there anybody else here to speak? Jan Cameron?
And I believe that there's a representative from the square also.
Okay, so say that again, please.
There's a representative from the square and Mr. Bill Odell, who is testifying on behalf of the project.
Okay, let's hear from the square.
You asked for the square?
Yes. Jan, who is here?
Can you hear me?
Suzanne Sessions.
Okay.
Is here.
Yes, we can.
Hi. And Bob, would you leave that color design that you've got up there now? So
certainly, of course.
Hi. Okay. First of all, the Lafayette Square Development Committee wants this to happen. We want this to happen a whole lot. We always have. And the only thing that we are going to comment on today is the use of materials and the proportion of the use of materials. Everything else, as far as we're concerned, we've passed off of. We passed on. So, but I do want to comment on the material use. And so, you know, after reviewing this project, and I had to do it with a microscope finally because I couldn't read all the detail and see all the texture of what all those different walls were made of. But notably on section 306 under our commercial mixed use construction on large sites, section 306.3, which says the Lafayette Square Development Committee sees, I take that back, excuse me. Let me get to 306.3, building materials and color. Similar building materials used in the district shall be acceptable, such as red brick, stone, or cementitious stucco veneers, details as stone and wood. Metal veneers and metal veneers, but cement board, plastics, and large expanses of glass should be used in moderation and as a trim and are prohibited as a primary building material. Now, because of the fact all the elevations are not marked, I had to take a guess as what I was looking at. But I see the entire top floor cement plank siding, a full 5-story north and south wall section in the middle of each side, and all balcony inset walls, they're either marked as accent color to be decided or colored as the cement board on the renderings. And because of the fact it's not marked out, I just took a guess at that. But a rough calculation would be to be about 20 to 22% of that exterior walls are proposed as cement board. Now, 22 in our view is not moderate. We asked the owner developers to reduce the use of cement board and consider other materials. We feel that all flat apartment walls should be brick, you know, some accepted color. So what I'm looking at on this one that's up here, I see the accent wall in the center, and I don't know what that material is meant to be. And I see to the right of it a shaded, indentated section of wall. And I was taking that to be the cement board, but I could be corrected on that. And then on the other side, the same thing happens, but to a larger degree on the south-facing side towards the alley. The whole center section is total gray, the same as, and that is a considerable amount of that area, if that is indeed cement board, to be excessive to us. But as I say, I cannot, it's not marked off, and so I cannot tell, nor Bob, did you suggest that when you just spoke. But we think that we just cannot support, this plan as shown with the materials. And we're asking the Preservation Board to withhold acceptance until these materials are revised. And I can see why the cement board is used on the roof section, the mansard section. Looks good up there too. It doesn't have to be planks, it could be different wedges, I understand that. But I don't understand why it's pulled down on all the vertical sections of the walls, if that's indeed what it is. And those are much more of a concern than the insert patios that right now are accented in yellow in some boards. So those are our concerns. We just want to see less of the cement board and, you know, and some alternate materials suggested.
That's, I have no idea.
You have
Okay.
what? Excuse me?
I'm not sure who that was that said that.
Oh.
But this is, it was not me.
Hi, Bob. Yeah.
Hi. So a couple things. Yeah, we're very familiar with that section 306 of the code, and it does say in moderation or trim for cementous boards. And you're actually pretty good, even with your microscope at your numbers. You're fairly close. We're actually, you know, the beauty of the computer and the technology is we can, it kind of keeps track of all this for us. And overall, we don't have to do all those little calculations. The computer will just tell us. And we're at about 19% of cement board throughout the project. If you look at, like, say the Missouri and the McKay Street facades.
Can you pull those up?
Sure. I certainly can. I think we had a rendering back here. If you look at these facades here, it's actually, you know, in isolation. So it's 19% overall. On these facades, it's actually like 11%.
Correct.
Of the overall facade here. It's a little bit more on the front. The recessed balconies are in fact all cement board, like you presumed is correct. This metal ribbon, I'm actually going to go back to wherever I was with these renderings. The ribbon, and kind of describe this as a ribbon that starts out vertically, becomes a horizontal canopy, and then wraps up. That's all metal, so that's not cement board. But the accent color would be the recessed balconies, where you're really visually kind of seeing the balcony. And I'm just going to, I'm going to zoom in on any of these, and most of that is going to be, as you look up, you can imagine you're going to see the glass railing in front of it.
But the area to the right of it
is cement board. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So
and
there's that.
And if you could pull up the back side, the south facing, the alley.
Yeah, and I am.
You had it up there for. Yeah,
I did.
You've got one that kind of faces. It's on an angle, oblique angle.
Yes, it. Yeah, that does. It shows a bit of it.
There's part of it.
Yeah, there's part of it. So yes, and so the alley facade is primarily cement board. But I would suggest that there's kind of a history in the square, actually in a lot of neighborhoods, not just Lafayette Square, where the front of the buildings will be a little bit more refined materials. It'd be, the stone, rendered plaster, face brick, and then as you wrap around the sides, they'll go to common brick. The alleys are who knows what they. I mean, there's this, traditionally there is a street facade that's more formal, more higher end materials per se. And then with the alleys becoming a little bit more eccentric and different materials. So I think in that sense of patterning, it
well, that's
fits
what I'm concerned on, Bob. This backside that is being treated as, the second rate side. It's really not. It's the backside of a building, but it's not. And we in the square do not approve of facading with cement boards on the backs of our buildings. In fact, it's our code that says that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use some cement board on this. Of course you can. But I think the amount that you're showing, especially on this back side, takes it out of the moderate. And this is where we ask you to look at a different material for all of these flat walls, both on the south and north side. And your accent walls, that's something else entirely. But I think it's going to give this a backside or an alley side appreciation, and that's not really what the building is meant to be. Nor does it follow what we're saying in our code for. We wanted to see all these different materials used. We wanted to see them used, but it's just as you put it yourself, you're treating it as a less than, front of building appearance. And it can be a lesser material. And I don't even know what to suggest you to use other than cheaper bricks or whatever, or some of these other cement boards. But just please give us brick on our walls.
Suzanne, is there anything else?
No, that's about it.
Thank you very much. Who else, Jan?
I believe that's it.
Bill O'Dell. He's here to answer questions. Bill O'Dell is. Just answer questions if you have them.
Anybody have questions? Anybody have questions for Mr. O'Dell? Commissioner Killeen?
I have a question for Suzanne Sessions, actually.
Then let's finish it in the other order. Does anybody have a question for Mr. O'Dell?
And I can make a brief statement at the right time.
Okay, go ahead.
We've worked for nearly 3 years with the neighborhood. I think we have a design that's met there are many requirements over the years. And particularly this spring, as we've gone through this design, I would urge you to support it. We need to get this project going. It's 3 years and going.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Killeen?
Suzanne, what did you think about that solid to void ratio and the size of the windows issue I brought up?
Honestly, Mike, I hadn't even considered it. When I looked at this the first time, my eyes went to the mansard, the body of the building, and the base of this. And I can see your point. I could see, for instance, where you see some of the larger, taller windows, next to the accent yellow wall, that is more pleasing to the eye. But, that's not as big a concern to us, but it is a concern now that you mention it. I can see that. Our concern is we just don't want to see a second-rate material put on that much of the building. And you can say what you want about it, but it's not the quality that brick is.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? Jan, is there anybody else to speak?
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Fathman, have you got a motion?
Yes, I move that we grant preliminary, oh, I can't read my notes, I'm sorry, but anyway, an approval by the Cultural Resources Office and staff.
Barb Burkett, did you hear that motion?
To grant preliminary
Yes.
approval for final plans approved by the Cultural Resource Staff's office.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Second.
Okay, we have 2 seconds, so that's either a fourth or a zero. I don't know which. Adana, did you record a second?
I did not.
I got Vines as the second.
Okay. Then that's what the record will show. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Killeen?
Well, I certainly respect Mr. O'Dell's time that's gone into this project for 3 years, but I think another month would be probably warranted here, since it appears the architect and the neighborhood association haven't talked to figure out these final details on how much material should be this or that. And I might be a lone voice on this, but I think those windows are too small for Lafayette Square. It looks like we've got a bunch of bathrooms between living rooms there. The windows should be larger and just a more welcoming design that sort of feels like a distant cousin to what you'd see up in the square. So I would vote against this motion, and I think they should wait a month and figure things out.
Staff, Commissioner Hamilton has been kicked off the call and would like back on. Can somebody see if she's waiting?
Yeah.
I do not see her. She's not showing up as waiting.
She has emailed Adana saying that Zoom has kicked her off.
Okay. We have no request from her. Oh, there she is.
So she's on now.
She's on now.
Okay, discussion on the motion continues.
Does she know?
Anybody else? Okay, there's a motion's been made and seconded. Would you call the roll, please, Jan?
Yes.
Can we restate the motion?
Would you like to restate the motion?
Can someone say the motion? I got kicked off, so I don't know what the motion.
The motion is for preliminary approval with the usual condition.
Okay.
Mr. Vines,
Vote yes.
Mr. Richardson.
He
He's
abstained.
recused.
Right. Mr. Kotar.
Aye.
Ms. Fathman.
Passman.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
No, I vote no.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Colleen.
No.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
And Mr. Callow.
Abstain.
What do we have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention.
5 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Would you poll the board again, please? I thought I heard a second no.
Okay.
Mr. Vines.
Yes.
Mr. Richardson.
Abstain.
Mr. Kotar. Mr. Kotar? We'll come back to him.
He's muted.
Ms. Fathman.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Mr. Colleen.
No.
He's a no. Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
And who did we miss?
Kodar.
Mr. Kodar.
He's recused. I mean, I'm sorry, he's muted.
He's also talking.
Okay.
He did vote aye in his
Kodar,
word.
aye.
Yeah.
He did.
Okay.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no? Did you vote yes?
Aye.
I think he said aye.
He did.
And I abstain again. What is the vote?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 1 no.
And 1 abstention. 5 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you all very much. Commissioners, Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Yes.
Do I hear a motion on the final 2 agenda items?
Yes, I move that the Preservation Board should direct the staff to prepare a report for the State Historic Preservation Office that agenda item E meets the requirements of National Register Criteria A for community planning and development, and that item F meets the criteria for A commerce.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Randy Vine.
Is there any
Randy
discussion?
Vine.
Would somebody call a roll, please?
Vines,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Kotar,
Aye.
Fathman,
Yes.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
and Callow.
Abstains?
All right, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 yeses, 1 abstention.
Great, the motion carries. Director's report.
More musical chairs.
Richard?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
This is Melanie. Before we adjourn, I have a question to ask for future meetings, okay?
Yes, I'll remember.
After the report. Thank you.
More muting, please.
The directors. So if we go back, just make sure.
So it's, some of it's not coming through for some reason.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a director's report. This is supposed to say director's report as the cover page, but obviously the letters dropped off of it. So let's go to the next slide. So actually, can we make the screen slightly smaller? Is there a way to do that? Okay. So there was one item that was on your preliminary agenda that didn't end up on the final agenda. And that is, it's a preliminary review for a house at 2250 South Jefferson in the McKinley Heights Local Historic District.
Is it a ghost house?
Pardon me?
Is it a ghost house?
I promise that the future items in this presentation will be of higher visual quality than the ghost house. But as you can see along this corridor, there's the common house type is a brick based townhouse design. The design will be very similar in style. We'll work out some final details. I don't think the doorway works out especially well here, but the feeling of the staff was that this was a project that had both the support of the Preservation Board, was in accordance with the standards, and had the support of the Neighborhood Association. And where we have projects like that, as you will see in the rest of this report, we have been trying to, because it is cumbersome to do Zoom meetings, we've been trying to pare down the projects to the ones where we think there is some real contention to be discussed. So this is one that we're working with the applicant and the developer to, and the architect and the neighborhood to make sure we end up with a product that that is a quality one, but we think this one would have been supported by the board, and therefore did not put it on the board agenda. Next slide, please. This is a project at 2010 Crittenton in the Benton Park district. The picture on the right is a building that actually came to the Preservation Board because the owner had put in a garage without a permit. There's a vacant lot on the side of that building. You can see in the illustrations on the left, the center illustration shows the building that is there currently, and then it also shows the proposed subsequent construction, which again, in accordance with working with the Benton Park Neighborhood Association, garnered their support and the alderman's support, and therefore we chose not to bring that to the board, but this is a new construction project that will take place in Benton Park, most likely. Next slide, please. Likewise, this is also a project that garnered support from the Benton Park Neighborhood Association and Alderman Dan Gunther. This is a really interesting project. The developer is a furniture maker himself, and is going to do, this building is very contemporary and modern on the back, but the front of it is kind of following the vocabulary of the historic buildings, but at the same time has an interesting roof. I believe the roof on this is going to be copper, and I think it will be a compliment to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is a project that, again, the staff signed off on. Technically, the standards don't allow backlit signs, but in this particular case, again, it had the support of the business district on Delmar Boulevard. This is in the vicinity of Skinker to Bolivar. And it also replaced a very bad backlit sign that you can see on the right-hand side. This is a channel sign, and the design of the sign is very nicely placed below the sill of the second-story windows and above the first-story storefront. So this is one that will be going in at 5876 Del Mar.
Is the Palomino Stephen Fitzpatrick Smith place?
I think he sold it.
He sold it?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I like the new sign better.
Yes, the new sign is definitely an upgrade. Next slide, please. This is a really exciting project. It is in the Shaw Historic District. So I don't know if folks are familiar with the Shaw School. It's a very large middle school that extends from Tower Grove Avenue over to Clem. It would be on your immediate right in the picture on the left. You can actually see on the picture on the right the little fence that goes around it. Dave Bailey, we all know, I think a lot of folks will know his restaurants. He's rehabilitating the gas station on the corner and then adding this addition that you see in the illustration on the left. Staff was concerned, he's using historic tax credits. Staff was concerned that the scale of the addition might kind of dwarf the scale of the gas station. We talked about a number of solutions with the applicant and came down to the solution that they will darken the facade of the addition, which you see has the solar panels on the roof of it, in order to kind of make that disappear a little bit and appear smaller, and to emphasize the brightness of the garage, the historic garage in front of it. And next slide, please. This is a very strange situation. This is a building at the very kind of northern edge of the Central West End Historic District. It is located along the alley that separates Washington Avenue from Del Mar Boulevard. So Third Degree Glass Factory is sort of catty corner from here. And in fact, this is a project that's being done by Doug Auer from Third Degree Glass. It's a design firm that's going to move into this building. If you look at the picture on the upper right, you'll see the small sort of brown brick building with the canopy on it and a cross, because it was converted to a church at some point. This is being converted into a design firm's office. And the design firm has decided, and has Mr. Auer's support and the Central West End Association's support, to essentially put a new facade on the front of it. So the building on the left, that brown facade you see, will cover entirely the front of the current building. The current building facade will remain, but it will remain behind that wall. And frankly, that design is really antithetical to the historic district. When that was pointed out, a solution was come to, which was, look, if the neighborhood wants to do this and the designers all want to do it, it's on the edge of the district. What we have talked about doing is removing this building from the historic district as this change happens. If it's not in the district, there's no problem with it having this massive alteration to the historical fabric of it. We just don't think it's appropriate within the district. There's a consensus on that. We've talked to Alderwoman Navarro about it, and in the relatively near future, I think you'll be seeing a proposal come to amend the boundaries of the Central West End Local Historic District to cut this out. You can see at the bottom of your screen, there's the way that the lots are being subdivided, so that little parcel will be scooted out of the district, and the remaining part of the parcel will be put into it, or will stay in it. What's holding all this up from happening is they haven't divided the parcels yet. Once the parcels get divided, then we can change the boundaries of the district. Next slide, please.
Director Krasnoff?
Yes.
You know who else lives on that street, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Everything's okay there?
Yes.
Good.
So what we see on the screen now is an infill project that, again, has the support of the neighborhood association, and is a very similar design to the house on the right. This is in the so-called Central West End district, a proposed structure. The one thing I'll say about this is we have found that the porch design is a lacking in a lot of ways design-wise. So they have found a model example from a different storefront, different porch across the street on Westminster, and they're pursuing that as a different design for the porch for this project. The Central West End Association is reviewing that now, but I don't anticipate this coming to the board because there is a consensus on the project. Next slide, please. This is a place that used to be the fancy French bakery whose name I cannot pronounce.
Pachoni.
I'm sorry?
Pachoni.
Yeah, that's it. So it is now chicken out. And it is at the corner, as folks probably familiar with this corner, it's Skinker and Delmar. The proposal from the owner was to create a walk-up window for their chicken place. This has heavy support from the Loop business district that's been made known to us early and often. We've had a lot of conversation with the alderwoman from the area, and she's comfortable with this. So we are setting a bit of a precedent here. It makes me a little bit nervous, quite honestly, but walk-up service is something that I think we're seeing more of now, especially in the age of COVID. And the staff has gone ahead and recommend and supported this project at the staff level.
I would have voted for it.
I'm sorry?
I would have voted for it.
Okay, duly noted. Next slide, please. This is a project that's not in a historic district. This comes under the parts of our ordinance that deal with building structures on either funded by the city or that are on city property. So this is a project for Great Rivers Greenway on Keener Plaza, which they operate. The Keener Plaza sort of little mini park there. The proposal here is for a utility station and also a sort of a public service station as well. The design has kind of two components. The part that faces Keener is going to be very bright, and it's going to use either a kind of electronic coloring system that can change or be painted a color depending on their budget. I actually, as the director, I have to say, I liked this project a lot. If you look around Keener Plaza, it's a lot of gray, it's a lot of brown, it's a lot of colors that, earth tones that are kind of boring, quite honestly. So I think having a building that kind of pops here will be beneficial. There's talk on the other facades of doing murals. But this is a project that's not in a historic district and is going forward in the design phase currently. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with a couple projects that the board has approved in the past and is now are now constructed to give you all an update. So this is 1900 Lafayette, the school addition to the mid-century modern school. There was a one-story building. So the upper left-hand corner of your screen shows the before picture. It was a one-story school building that's being made a three-story school building. The picture on the upper right is the rendering made by the design firm UIC that was proposed to the Preservation Board a couple years ago. And finally, the bottom picture is the actual built project today. I would say that to the credit of the architect and the school, the project looks like the project that was shown to the board. And I think that's a great, it's great to see that when what we are shown in a rendering and in drawings turns out to be exactly what the building looks like. If we go to the next slide, this is a bit of a complex project. So that's the part of the project that is along Lafayette. Then the project also comes out of the center core of the campus, if you will, out onto Mississippi Avenue, which is the picture on the upper left is the before picture. You see the vacant lot there. The picture on the upper right is the rendering showing the proposed construction to be built. And I apologize, I didn't have the right angles lined up here, but the bottom picture is the actual built construction to be compared with the upper right-hand rendering, although they're from different angles. Again, I think UIC did a nice job of representing their project. I think what the board signed off on is what we all got. And I think it's a successfully executed design that enhanced the streetscape over having that vacant lot there. So that's an exciting project. And then the last project I have, I believe it's the last one, is a project at Menard in Shenandoah in Soulard. This is an interesting project because it was initially proposed as an almost exclusively industrial looking building. The project fell through, and then tragically Phil Durham passed away. And so the board then approved the redesign of the site, which you see here. The upper picture is a picture of the Shenandoah streetscape, and the lower picture is a picture of the Menard streetscape. So the Menard is the north-south street through Soulard, and Shenandoah is the east-west street through Soulard. And then if we go to the next slide, we see on the top is the vacant lot that used to be there. And then down below is the executed building. So let's go back to the previous slide for a moment. Give everyone a chance to just look at that, take it in, and now let's go back to the built slide. So you can see that there's the portion that extends along Menard that is a flounder type design. And then you have the portion of the design to the east of that extends along Shenandoah that is a more of a typical sort of industrial design with some pilasters and some paired multi-light windows. Again, I think this is a very, the design that was shown to the board is what got executed here. I think it was well done. They've really finished out that corner in a very urban and robust way. And I think that's a project that's a complement to the Soulard Local Historic District. And next slide. Next slide says we're done. So that is my director's report. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
New business, Commissioner Fathman.
Oh, thank you. I need some help from all of you. This has to do with the fact that my husband's laptop was in the shop. So when I started doing Zooms, it was with my desktop with no camera and my phone, which is what I'm doing now. Our church choir has done